and welcome to Super Hell, aka the Mystery Spotcast, a show where two recovering Supernatural fans subject themselves to a rewatch. Thanks again for bearing with us in our hiatus, and if you're new here, welcome. I'm Klaudia, my pronouns are she, her. You can find me on social media at Klaudia Says.
And I'm Ollie. I use any pronouns, and you can find me on social media at Ollie Fresh. It's fresh with a PH. So let's talk.
Oh boy. So
these two episodes, I feel like there has to be some sort of Hall of Fame of worst episodes.
Yeah, and the reason that I like talking about these two episodes together is that it really represents what Supernatural is about, which is that it's either the worst show on television or the best show on television, and there's nothing in between.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
The first episode, Bugs, if you've heard anything about this show, you may have heard of this episode. It's infamous for being top 10 worst and most racist episodes.
Oh, it is. Yeah, she is not our friend. We are not friends with Bugs.
And it's not just the racism. It's also badly written and like also it's like there's more to it. Like it's bad. So,
yeah, we'll get into it. It's like, oh guys, you did a boo-boo. Okay, let's get into it. This episode starts, we get the cold open, which is a title card that says Oasis Plains, Oklahoma. They're clearly on a construction site, and there's guys working on this, like, building houses. It looks like a standard, like, neighborhood that's just being developed. Two men whose names are Dustin and Travis start talking about, like, how expensive the house is and how expensive the houses are. And then Dustin starts to feel the ground shake. So he's like, well, that's no good. So he walks over and falls in a sinkhole. So Travis is like, oh no, what's wrong? And Dustin's like, I think my ankle's broken. So Travis is like, oh my gosh, okay, I'll go find a rope. Come, and then cuts to Dustin in the hole. He notices that there's a bunch of, like, beetles around him, and he's like, oh my god, help. Travis finally runs up with the rope, and Dustin is obliterated. He is bleeding out of his eyes and his mouth. This shot is actually deeply upsetting because we do get a shot of him and he looks dead. Like, looks
It's this, I mean, this whole episode has some of the worst body horror, like, and that's not a bad thing, but, like, and the sinkhole thing, like, it has some of my worst fears in it.
Yeah.
I'm like, what were they thinking with this?
No, it's such a stark contrast. This episode, they really said, we are going to make the grossest episode that we possibly can, while also making it just not horribly written. But anyway, Dustin, rest in peace, King. Then we get the title screen that's like Supernatural, and we cut to Sam, who's standing outside of a bar, and he's reading a paper. And then Dean walks down with a stack of money in his hand, and he's like, hee, I made a bunch of money hustling in pool. And Sam is like, we could get a job once in a while. And Dean's like, okay, but this is fun and easy. And the other way is, like, honest. It's pretty easy to pick, which is very funny to me because, Sam, when are you guys getting a job? What job? Like,
also, they run credit card scams.
Yeah, like, Sam, what job are you, like, let's go get a job while we're here in town for a week. Like,
they write clickbait articles online.
Oh my god, BuzzFeed employee Sam and Dean.
We got this covered is employed by Sam and Dean under various bylines.
Oh my god. So then Sam is like, hey, look, I found this article in this paper I'm reading about how this construction worker died due to a human form of mad cow disease. To which Dean has the funniest response, maybe in the entire show. I'm like, this, I think, is the redeeming moment for this show, where Sam's like, yeah, it's human mad cow disease. And Dean goes, wasn't that on Oprah once? And
that
and Sam is like, you watch Oprah? And Dean makes the funniest face. And he is like, oh, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. I'm like, once again, who is the target audience for this show? What choice are they trying to make with this? It's unclear.
Especially in all these early episodes, there's like one moment of that where it's like, aren't you so macho, Dean? And he's like, does something typically homosexual for the early 2000s. And you're like, this was like purposeful gay coding specifically for that time as well. You're like,
yeah, it's like, if you said someone now, like, oh, you watch Oprah, that is not a thing. But then it was like, oh, that's a girl show and you're watching Oprah. Like, I just don't get it.
Like, well, the other piece of this that really dates it is mad cow disease. You're like, oh, this is a snapshot in time.
Yeah. Dean is like, well, okay, dude dies of mad cow disease, not our problem. And Sam's like, well, mad cow disease has actual symptoms. And according to this article, this dude did not have any symptoms. He just like died. So let's go to Oklahoma. So they go. Then it cuts to them arriving at the gas company, because I guess these guys were like doing the gas lines and that kind of stuff for the neighborhood. But they arrive at the gas company that Dustin and Travis worked for. They walk up and they're like, are you Travis? And he's like, yeah, what's up? And they're like, Uncle Dusty used to talk about you all the time. What happened? And Travis is like, well, he never mentioned having nephews. And he's like, oh, well, he talked about you all the time. You were like his best friend. And Travis is like, oh, that's so sweet. Anyway, yeah, he had no symptoms of mad cow disease, but that's what the doctors are saying. So, and then Sam and Dean are like, well, can you show us where he died? Can you show us where it happened? So Travis was like, yeah. It's a fun interaction. And then
it's very like they do a lot in these early episodes, I feel like, to be like, let me have a interesting story. I'm a family member. I'm a whatever. They really don't do that later on. They're just like, yeah, I'm in the FBI. Anyway.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, what happened? They were like, that is too hard. We are simply going to lie a lot. So then they show up at the hole, the cringe hole that Dustin fell in, that is surrounded by caution tape, because it is an active crime scene. It's not really a crime scene, but it is like a dude died in there. But Sam and Dean go past it, and Dean is like, you think there's a creature in there? And Sam's like, I don't know. And they're like, oh, we should go down. And Dean is like, oh, you should go in the hole. Oh, are you scared? You scared to go in the hole? So Sam is like, okay, well, shit, I'll go in the hole. Ties a rope around himself and jumps in the hole. And then you really would have thought that there would be more of Sam in the hole, but no. It immediately cuts to them in the car talking about what Sam found in the hole.
It's very like you're just like it's just a lot to unpack. I don't want to unpack it.
Also, from a narrative perspective, that scene just did not need to be there. Like, you could have cut that scene entirely and just had them be like, so we went to the hole.
So we went to I can't. You're
done. So they're in the car, and Dina's like, really, all you found were some beetles? And Sam's like, yeah, but there were a lot of beetles. And then he says, there was no other evidence that anything was in there. No, like, holes, nothing like the beetles were the only thing in there with him. So they're like, oh, well, let's do some research. So Dean's like, look, there's an open house that's having a barbecue, which, you know, all open houses do. So it's like, let's go to the barbecue. And Sam was like, that seems kind of stupid. He's like, well, I want to go to a bar. I want to go and we can ask people, like, if anything like this has happened, or if this is like the first weird death in this town. And Sam was like, well, it's got nothing to do with the free food, does it? And Dean's like, okay, well, maybe. Who cares? It's just the pacing of this I just feel like there's like the interactions in this episode are just weird.
They just jumped in a hole in the ground and now they're gonna show up to a barbecue. Like, hi, random men off the street who just were in a hole in the ground.
Oh my god, hole explorers. No.
You can't say that.
Speaking of hole explorers, we're about to have another horrible line in this show.
No, please, I can't.
So Sam and Dean go to the house that the barbecue is at, and they are like, hey, a gentleman named Larry Pike introduces himself, and he's like, oh, I'm the developer of this neighborhood. So yeah, please, come on in. Are you guys interested in living here in Oasis Plains? And they're like, yeah, oh yeah, like, yep, we're interested in looking at the houses. Larry says the worst thing that anyone has ever said on this show. And he says that the house in the neighborhood is open to any race, religion, color, or, looks them up and down, sexual orientation, because he assumed that they were a couple. Immediately, Dean is like, we are brothers and we are looking for a house for our dad who's getting on in years. And he's like, oh, okay.
He's like, oh, okay. But if you were, like, there's so much to unpack there, because it's like, number one, these two guys who, like, are ostensibly dressed very macho and just jumped out of, like, the most vintage car you've ever seen. You looked straight at Dean Winchester and you went, oh, that's a fruit. And I know, like, I know that you're supposed to assume, oh, just because they were two guys who showed up, whatever. But no, I'm getting the vibe that you looked at Dean and Sam and went, I think they're fruits.
Also, like, I'm sorry, I don't know what vibe he was getting, and it happens again, and we'll get there. But like, I don't know what vibe they were getting. But it's like they're ostensibly, especially during that time period, no one would look at them and be like, gay.
Yeah.
Like, it was just a vibe. He was like, I'm getting kind of a gay vibe from you.
And you're like, and here's the piece, as we will find out later, is that this line about the race, religion, color, or sexual orientation it's very important to the plot. But it's totally railroaded over by the whole Sam and Dean gay thing.
Yeah, it's so upsetting. I'm like, please get out of here.
And it's also very emblematic of both the show and this episode of, like, we are both progressive and extremely regressive at the same time.
Yeah, that could be this episode's title, progressive and regressive. So they go inside and they're talking to Larry a little about the neighborhood. And Larry's like, oh, it's nice and safe and clean. And look, this is my wife, Joni. She loves it here. And she's like, it really is a great place to live. So Larry steps away and we meet Linda Bloom. She comes over and introduces herself as the realtor. And she sees them and she's like, yeah, no, I love living here. And just so you know, we accept anyone of any race, religion, color, or sexual orientation. And this top 10 worst moments in Supernatural history. Dean is like, oh, well, I'm going to go keep talking to Larry. I'll be right back, honey. Slaps Sam's ass and then leaves.
Personally, I wanted to pass away.
Yeah, I'm like, you don't stop it. No.
You like, and you don't understand, like, watching this in retrospect is hard. For those of you who are new to Supernatural and listening, before Destiel was a thing and before Castiel was introduced, people still got a bit of a gay vibe from Dean and also from Sam. And because there were also no women on the show, they did start shipping the brothers together. And not just some people, like a lot of people. So that's why Destiel became so big, because once Castiel was on the show and it was a legitimately, like, good ship,
they were like, we can get away from the incest now, finally.
Like, why were you motherfuckers out the water?
Like, why were you in there in the first place?
Because of this.
Yeah, it's so
bad. But you know what? Thinking about this and also the last episode of the series, anyways,
anyway,
I'm gonna die.
Um anyway, Dean and Larry are walking around the house and they find a jar that has a bunch of bugs inside. And Dean's like, "Oh, bug enthusiast in the house, huh?" And Larry's like, "Oh, they're my sons. He's big into bugs. Ugh, so gross. Like, he is clearly like my son's stupid little hobby." Then it cuts back to Sam and Linda. And Linda's like, "Oh, the houses have steam showers and they're all great." And Sam's like, "Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh." And then he focuses behind her and he sees a tarantula crawling on the table that she has her hand on. And Sam was like, "Excuse me," and basically pushes her out of the way and picks up this tarantula in his hands and sees a teen. And he walks up and he says, "Hey, is this yours?" And this guy is like, "Yeah, it is mine. Please don't tell my dad." And Sam's like, "Who's your dad?" And he's like, "Larry." So he finds out this kid is named Matt and he is Larry, the developer's son.
I love when Sam can immediately identify who is neurodivergent and a minor just in the room because he's like, like me.
Yeah, and then he's like, "I'm not gonna tell your dad. Sometimes I get when dads are bad."
This is another early episode where they were like, we're gonna use parallels.
Yeah, truly. They were like, the amount of like Sam being like, "I have issues with my dad" in this episode, even though it is like a little bit out of character. Like, having issues with his dad is not out of character, but the amount of which he brings it up, I'm like, that does not feel normal.
You're like, bestie, he's at the, what is he at? The anger stage? Now that his dad's missing, he was at denial. Now he's at anger.
um then Larry walks up and he sees his son and he's like, "Hey, get out of here and take your stupid bug with you." Um and Sam and Dean are kind of watching this happen. Um and Sam's like, "Does that remind you of anyone?" And Dean's like, "No." And Sam's like, "Okay, well, I always used to get yelled at by dad, but you didn't because you were the good son." And Dean is like, "Okay, well, you know what, Sam, you're kind of out of line sometimes too." And Sam's like, "Oh, well, I wanted to play soccer instead of learning how to bow hunt. And dad was disappointed in me." And Dean's like, "Well, bow hunting is a very useful skill."
Is wanting to play soccer a metaphor for gayness? Discuss.
We can't.
So, maybe I'm just neurodivergent and a minor and I wanted to play soccer, but dad wanted me to kill people.
I don't think people, but like Dean is like, "Okay, well, anyway, I don't really care." So get this. About a year ago in this neighborhood, some dude died from severe bee stings, like an allergic reaction. And they're like, "Oh, well, bug moment. It's got to be related to bugs." Bugs. Ugh. Just like the title of the episode, bugs. Then it's nighttime and they are driving. So they are just, I guess they just left the barbecue. They said, "We're done." And they're like, "Well, why would bugs do this? Why?" Like, they're talking about it like the bugs are like, "No, fuck these people." But they're like, "Why would the bugs do this?" And Dean is like, "There are no signs of ghost activity." And they're like, "Well, what about Larry's son? Because he has a thing for bugs. He's got a lot of bugs as pets." And then they're driving through the neighborhood and Dean is like, "Pull over to the empty house. This empty house that's on the street." And Sam's like, "What?" Dean like pops up and he opens the garage door and he's like, "Get in." And Sam's like, "Are we about to squat in this house, this empty house?" And Dean is like, "I want to try the steam shower."
Once again.
It is this episode. What is your problem? Then we cut to Linda, the realtor's house. She like gets home from work, I guess. She turns on the television. And the news is talking about some bullshit. Then she's like, "Okay." Then a spider basically just like falls on her forehead and she's like, "Oh." and she wipes it away. But then she's like, I'm gonna go take a shower. So she gets in the shower, and this is a horrible shot where we are seeing her like her face, and behind her is the shower head, and from the shower head a bunch of bugs just start, like a bunch of spiders just start crawling out.
My worst nightmare. It's my worst nightmare.
Yeah, but she turns around and she's like, ah, and then starts to try to run and flies through the glass of the shower, and then we see a bunch of blood on the ground, and then we see a bunch of like it cuts to her face and there's a bunch of spiders crawling on her face. It's not good. Then the next morning is Sam like running through the house. He's like, Dean, where are you? He hears the shower running and he knocks on the bathroom door and he's like, Dean, we gotta go. Dean opens the door. He's like, the shower is awesome. His hair is like wrapped up in a towel. Like,
he's a material girl.
I just don't understand what they were doing when they were writing this episode.
He's just a pretty little guy.
Yeah, very true. So Sam is like, okay, cool. I don't give a fuck about the shower. Somebody got hurted very bad. Someone died last night and we gotta go. So they take off to go to Linda's house and they pull up and there's a bunch of like police and paramedics and Larry, the developer, is standing outside. So Sam and Dean roll up and they're like, hey, Larry, what happened? And Larry's like, this is really not a good time, but Linda, the realtor, did pass away last night. And they're like, oh my gosh, what happened? And he's like, I don't know. I'm going to find out, but I got to go. So then Sam and Dean are like, well, you know what we got to do. Break into the house. So of course they sneak into the house, see the spiders in the bathroom, to which, okay, they break into this house that is an active crime scene. And Dean just like picks up a towel that's on the ground and
they
moves
do this
it.
constantly.
I'm like, guys, someone is going to know that someone was at the crime scene and move shit around.
I'm surprised they weren't on the FBI most wanted list earlier, to be frank.
Truly. But they're like, oh, she's covered in spiders. So they're like, okay, well, we have to talk to Matt, that little teenager. So Sam and Dean pull up to where this like school bus is letting out, and they see Matt get off of the bus. And then they see him walk in the opposite direction from his house, and as he walks into the woods. Then we see Matt like messing around with a little stick bug. And Sam and Dean walk up and they're like, hey, what's your deal, buddy? We want to talk to you. And Matt, in a stunning moment of clarity, says, hey, are you guys like serial killers? And they're like, oh, no, we're not. But we do want to talk about bugs.
We are also neurodivergent and minors.
Dean's like, I'm not neurodivergent. And Sam's like, well, okay. So they're like, oh, what's up with your bug thing? Do you know Linda died due to spiders? And Matt is like, okay, I like bugs. Bugs are fun. I did not kill anyone.
They really thought they gotcha with that one. They were like, ah.
Oh my God, you like bugs? Bugs? But Matt is like, listen, I did not have anything to do with that. However, something weird is happening with the bugs around here. Follow me. So they're walking and they're like, so what's up with bugs? And like, what is your whole deal? And Matt is like, yeah, my dad doesn't listen to me ever. He doesn't like me, which, you know, he's like, I'm a teenager. And Sam is like, Sam, I'm like, you are such a bitch in this episode, for real. Sam is like, Matt, things are gonna get, how old are you? And he's like, I'm 16. And he's like, things are gonna get better in 2 years. And Matt's like, why 2 years? Sam's like, that's when you're gonna go to college. And then Dean is like, that's bad advice. The kid should stay with his family. And Sam looks at him like, what is wrong with you? Shut up. Sam is like making it a point to make everyone know that he hates his dad.
And both of them are very much like, how do I make this about me?
No, literally, I'm like, this kid is clearly suffering and you guys are dumping your adult drama onto him.
They're like, I'm the main character.
So they approach this sort of clearing, and Matt is like, look, there's a bunch of like bugs and earthworms and bees around this area. And there's this dirt mound that has a bunch of worms on it. So Dean walks up, puts his whole hand in this mound of worms, and finds a skull. So this is where we get into the transition to the racism aspect of the show.
Yeah. Well, and here's the piece that boggles my mind when they're like, what could this be? And there's like mounds of stuff and then they find a skull in it, whatever. I'm like, you are Sam and Dean. You see graves of all kinds all the time and you didn't see that and go, that looks like a grave?
Yeah. It's okay. Also, what they do next is
insane.
So not what you were supposed to do when you find human remains.
Well, to be fair, they do that all the time.
Okay, I'm talking about them. There's another character in this scene who I have beef with.
Oh, God.
So they go to the Department of Anthropology of a college. Sam and Dean bring in a box of uncovered skeletons from the area where they found the skulls. Skulls multiple, apparently.
Shout out to the Sam and Dean. They're copying the University of Pennsylvania Museum collection of skulls.
Yeah.
What an interesting reference to the anthropological human rights horror.
They are like, oh, well, there's a spirit channeling through the bugs. And then while they are walking into this department, they bring up their dad again. And Sam is like, he was always disappointed in me. And Dean's like, he wasn't disappointed. He was scared that something might happen to you if you were alone. And Sam was like, oh. And then they walk into this Department of Anthropology and they talk to a professor and they're like, we're actually in your class. And he's like, oh, cool. Okay. Then they show him the bones. If you were a good professor, which clearly this dude is not, because he doesn't recognize two men who are clearly not in his class. He is like, the proper thing you should do is be like, I need to notify someone about this. You can't just have bones. You can't just have human remains. It doesn't work like that. But I digress. The professor looks at the skull and he says, skeletons are from the skeletons are from around the time of the Native Americans.
I lost my mind at this part. Yeah. I was like, bestie, what?
And Sam says, were there any tribes or reservations within the vicinity here?
I have some news, Sam.
Hey, horrible news, Sam. But the professor's then like, oh, the Yuchi tribe is about 60 miles from that area, so maybe you should go talk to them. So Sam and Dean go to the Yuchi village.
They go to a reservation.
Yeah, they go to a reservation. And Sam and Dean walk inside to this building, whatever.
I think it's like a diner, I want to say.
Yeah.
It's like a diner because the guy's like sitting at a table, like playing cards or something.
Yeah. So they walk up to this man who's clearly like some sort of figure in like of the people there. He's clearly like an elder of some sort. So Sam and Dean walk up and Dean starts to talk and the guy's like, I don't talk to liars.
It was actually that's kind of a one iconic part where he's just like, no.
He said, Dean, you are a liar. This guy isn't. This taller guy, he's not a liar. I'll talk to him. So Sam is like, what's going on with this area? Was there anything there or anything that might have to do with like bugs? And the gentleman is like, yeah, there's some shit going on at that site. And Sam's like, yeah, we found bones. And I'm like, first of all, that man should be immediately being like, can I have the bones? Like, so we can, like, first of all, you disrupted a burial site. Fuck you. But also give us the bones so we can take care of them in like a respectful way.
Well, and this is the part of the episode that's nuts to me, because in any other, well, and that is racist, is that in any other supernatural episode, the whole thing to like resolve it is that there is a spirit who's like, their spirit is not at rest, and so you have they, and sometimes it's an object, sometimes it's somebody, like there's some unfinished business, sometimes it's their bones, sometimes it's whatever, and they have to like find them and like burn the bones, or they have to bury them properly, or they have to like find an item and give it to somebody or whatever. And with this, they're like, you have the bones, you could bring them to the people, because I think they mention they mentioned, I don't know, the Trail of Tears. They mentioned displacement earlier. I'm like, you could bring them to the people that they are of, and they could put these people to rest, which is a thing that happens in this show consistently. And they're like, we're not gonna do that.
No, at literally. All. It's so Sam and Dean, I hate you guys.
And and to be fair, like they say like the terms of this problem and this curse. And like, yeah, you can't really solve like generations of racism and displacement, but you can like lay people to rest. So
yeah, it's not even about the supernatural, it's just about the right thing to do. Like, but I digress. So this gentleman, whose name we just never find out, fine, he says, oh, well, I don't know anyone who was there, but here's a story about where their bones might be from. The tribe that was there was systematically murdered for 6 nights following the spring equinox. So the tribe laid a curse about how nature will protect the valley for 6 nights after the moon and sun share the sky as equals. And after the 6th night, not a single white person will be left alive. So Sam and Dean are like, oh, well, bugs seem like nature.
It's a white people curse. It's a white people curse.
And you know what? They're so right for that.
Yeah. And the other piece of it, I mean, to me, I'm like, I believe the writers of this episode were white. The white writers of this episode, what's going on there? But also, I don't know if they were trying to make some sort of point or whatever. I mean, this is where they actually, weirdly enough, this episode is where they introduce curse lore, and Dean says, he's like, oh, you can't break a curse, you have to just avoid it, which is fucking false. Later on, they break curses all the time. So maybe that's Dean just being like, you know what? That is a thing that we did, and that's valid. We just gotta go. And so, I mean, I guess that's good, but it's very like, it's very bad.
It's a hot mess.
It's a hot mess.
But like, also the entire time that this gentleman is telling a story about like a violent thing that happened to his people generations ago, Dean is standing there full like blue steel, lips puckered, and I'm like, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, I do believe that might just be what his face looks like, but still.
It literally that I think I purged that scene from my memory, because when I rewatched it I was like, oh dear God.
Yeah, this is maybe one of the worst scenes of the show. But so then Sam and Dean are like, oh, it's the 6th night, we gotta go, because that is not good. The only people, now that what's her face, the realtor is dead, the only people living in the town are Larry and his family. So they're like, oh my God, today is the 6th night after the equinox. We gotta get them out of there. So Sam and Dean are driving. Dean calls Larry and is like, hi, my name is Travis from the gas company. You got to get out of there because there's a gas leak. And Larry's like, I actually know Travis. Who is this? And Dean's like, and then hangs up. So Sam is like, okay, let me try this. He calls Matt and he's like, Matt, you got to get your family out of there. And he's like, how? My dad doesn't trust me. And Dean's like, takes the phone and is like, pretend that you have a horrible pain on your left side and you need to go to the hospital right now.
At least Sam is far more creative about. I don't know why they ever let Dean like do the convincing in the first place.
To be fair, if my kid, I mean, I don't have a kid, but I can't imagine if I was like a teenager who had beef with my parents and I was like, we need to go because there's a curse. Like, I feel like definitely saying like, hey, my appendix is about to burst open and we need to go to the hospital is probably a bit more convincing.
Yeah, like.
So I'm like, Dean, I get it. You were right for that one. However, they pull up to the house and see the cars are still there. So like, they are still there. So Sam and Dean run up and Larry's there and he's like, this is some ridiculous bullshit. Who are you people? You need to leave. And Matt is like, I'm sorry, I tried to get him out of the house, but he doesn't believe me. So they're all arguing. And then the largest swarm of bugs comes flying up from the horizon. And they're like, well, too late to get in the car. Let's get in the house. And the next scene is basically just them trying to barricade themselves in the house. Like at first they're like, oh, we're padding the doors, we're padding the windows. Larry's wife walks out and I was like, oh, what is happening?
Yeah, and like anybody who's had bugs in their house knows you're like, that's not gonna do anything. And then like, yeah, they go to the attic and there's like termites and whatever. And like, you're trying to like prevent small little bugs from coming in, my guy.
Yeah, it's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, my friend.
And they can't get phone like signal because like the bugs cover the entire house. Like it's
such a hot mess. and okay, also this is my favorite part of this scene is that Dean does have like an aerosol can full of bug spray that he's spraying at the bugs, which is doing nothing. Because here's the thing. Dean has done the thing where you like light a lighter or like a match in front of an aerosol can so it shoots fire. Dean, I have to tell you something. The reason that it burns when you do that with an aerosol can is because it is burning the chemicals that are in the can. If you are burning the bug spray, it's not going to work as it should. So basically, Dean is shooting fire at these bugs with no bug spray in it. Like you are burning away the effective part of the bug spray. It is not working.
Yeah,
but
the bad writing, as we said before, the bad writing isn't just the racism and like weird homophobia. It's also like legitimately bad writing. It is alluded to actually later in the series. I did forget about this. Like as we were talking about this, I kept thinking about the whole like implication that God has been writing their story and controlling them this whole time, and that God wrote this horrible episode. And I forgot that Chuck does mention that he does
really.
Yeah, in I don't remember what it's. I don't know which episode it is, but he apologizes to Sam and Dean for making them live bad writing. Eric Kripke himself has stated that he did not like this episode.
Yeah, I don't blame him. But okay, what's also very funny is that Sam and Dean, while they are like barricaded in the attic, are like, maybe it's sunrise, the bugs will go away. Through a hole in the ceiling, as termites and flies and bugs are flying in, they see the sunrise, and then all the bugs just disperse and leave. Then the next scene is a moving truck, and Larry is like, all right, yep, nope, we are not living here anymore. My family is moving out. We are no longer developing because of the bones that you found. I'm going to make sure that no one else ever lives on this land ever. So I'm like, okay, hashtag land back Larry. Love that for him.
Yeah, I'm like, how about not no one, but like, how about you give it back? Like yeah. Not nobody. Like you could give it back instead.
Larry, y'all are so embarrassing. But I digress. Dean and Sam are like, sorry about losing everything. You're handling this pretty well. And he's like, yeah, like this is clearly the most like biggest financial loss of my entire career. And then we see like his son, Matt, in the background. And he's like, I can't be too sad because I didn't lose my family. And it's actually kind of sweet. And then Sam sees Matt and he walks over and he was like, hey, dude, what are you doing? And he's throwing away his bug collection.
He's Sam's like, this hyperfixation is over.
He said, yeah, it's a little bit messed up. I cannot do this anymore. And Sam is like, so true. Then Sam and Dean are chilling. And Sam is like, I actually do want to find Dad. I need to apologize to him because I said some uncool things. And earlier in the episode, Dean had said, like, yeah, Dad used to drive past your school every once in a while to just make sure that you were okay. And Sam's like, well, why didn't he tell me that? And Dean's like, well, it's a two-way street, dude. You could have picked up the phone sometime. So yeah. But then Sam was like, yeah, I want to apologize for how I treated him and the stuff I said. And Dean's like, well, that's so funny because I'm sure you guys will be at each other's throats like 5 minutes later. All right, let's go. They go on to the next case.
It's very, Lord. Also, I was wrong before. God references this episode twice about bad writing. He in two different episodes. In another one, he says the last time he saw such a dark look on an editor's face was when he wrote bugs. So it actually is canonical. Fun fact, it's canonical in Supernatural that God himself wrote this episode horribly.
Yeah, he said this one sucks.
This one sucks. And also, speaking of God, I hate that I can say that. The kid, who plays this neurodivergent and a minor,
Matt,
the actor who plays him does come back as the angel Samandriel later, but also Larry and Joni, they come back in an episode. They play random other characters in an episode in season 15.
They said, oh my God, sorry for making you the worst characters in the show. We will fix it. So sorry.
And yeah. So,
okay, overall, bad episode. Thank you, yeah. Supernatural.
Just the worst. As a quick aside, before we go to our next episode, we do have a news segment, which is as penance for consuming this horribly homophobic piece of media, what's something that's not homophobic and actually incredibly good that you should also watch?
I had this realization the other day is I feel like I have been watching shows begging for representation for so long, and I finally was like, why don't I just watch things that are better? So I did. So one show that I want to bring up, and it just had its finale this week, is Our Flag Means Death. It is stars Taika Waititi's in it, for those of you who are big Taika Waititi fans. But it's just a really good show. It's about pirates. If you like the idea of, I think if you like the idea in Supernatural of kind of like the macho manliness kind of turned on its head and dealing with what it means to be masculine and the toxic masculinity of it all, but also something that's a little bit funnier and lighthearted, this show is so good. And it has a lot of canonical queer people. Like, it is not like, oh, one of the background characters and then other stuff is heavily implied. It's like everything that you think after watching it, like halfway through the season, if you're like, oh, this could happen, it will. It is an amazing show. I would recommend it. It has actual queer people. Sorry, Supernatural, you could never be her.
I mean, Supernatural couldn't be a lot of things.
Well, yeah.
Speaking of shows that are just airing, my show is, the overlap of fans, I just realized, is probably a circle, so you probably all already know this, but my show is The Owl House. It recently did come back from its mid-season hiatus. The Owl House is a Disney cartoon that the main character is a Afro-Latina and a bisexual young girl who has a girlfriend, and it's great because do you want a story about like a wizard and witch school that's not by a transphobic bitch? I have some great news. I have some fantastic news. There is a cartoon. If you like Alex Hirsch and Gravity Falls, it's his girlfriend Dana Terrace who made this show, and he's also in it. He plays two characters who are absolutely insane. There are multiple gay people. There are trans people. It is a grand old time, and the mouse did say, enough of that. So is this season 2? Season 3, it'll be a series of specials where they were like, wrap it up. What can I say about the Owl House except for, my God, that shit gay and legitimately gay. And you're like, this was on Disney Channel and there's legitimate gay people. Like in this second half of the season, it's very much Dana Terrace being like, how many times can I have Luce say my girlfriend on Disney Channel before the mouse takes me out with a sniper?
The idea Mickey is waiting and he's like, say gay one more time.
Literally. So yeah, the Owl House. Shout out to Our Flag Means Death and the Owl House.
Yeah, the only two bitches I respect. That's untrue. There's lots more bitches I respect, but one of them is not Supernatural.
Anyways, so that's good media. Back to terrible television. The second episode we're going to talk about today is actually a good episode. We do both extremes here.
This episode, I would also argue about this episode is, I don't even know if it was necessarily a good episode, but it has a lot of really good parts.
Yeah,
which I feel is par for the course for Supernatural.
Yeah, and it has a lot of plot to cover. So this episode is called Home because great news, they do go home, and by home I mean their childhood home, which they didn't live in for that long. They lived there until it perished in a fire in that first scene.
Yeah, when Sam was literally a baby and Dean was like 4 or I believe like 4.
Yeah. So it opens with this woman named Jenny. She's moved into a new house in Lawrence, Kansas, which is where they are from. She has 2 children, Sari? Is that how you say it?
Sari.
Yeah.
Sari.
Yeah, she has 2 children, Sari and Richie. They just moved there. Her husband just died. She's like very nervous in this new house, and they have this very funny little scene where like one of the kids is like, oh, I'm scared of the monster in my closet, and she's like, there's nothing there, and you're like, uh-oh.
Yeah. You assume also, just like for reference, I believe Sari is probably like 7 or 8.
Yeah.
And Richie is like maybe 2 or 3, like probably like 2 or 3-ish.
Yeah. So yeah, she's like she's unpacking, and there's like a noise, and it brings her to the basement, and it's very like, why would you go into the basement alone? I mean, I guess she lives alone with
she
her
doesn't
kids,
know
but...
that she doesn't know that she's in Supernatural, so unfortunately.
So she discovers this trunk of photos, and it shows a family. It is the Winchesters, which is John, Mary, Dean, and little Sammy, and which is very funny because Sam is the tallest one. And then she hears Sari screaming, and the closet door swings open, and there's this like figure standing in the closet, in the kids' closet, made of flames, and it's like a translucent person covered in flames. And then it cuts to Sam waking up from a dream of Jenny screaming from the kid's bedroom. So he's seen this in a vision. And so Dean and Sam, they're like researching new cases. And Sam is doing the like neurodivergent child in a horror movie thing where he's like sketching the things he saw in his visions.
Yeah. He just keeps drawing this same tree like 8 times.
He draws this tree and then he pulls out a photograph and he recognizes that it's the tree that was outside their house in Lawrence, which is kind of insane because like he was a baby. So
yeah.
I mean,
well, maybe that's what's so cool about it, is that he was like, keep seeing this tree, and then he's like,
I remember that. Well, and I guess that's what tips him off. That so he's like, "Hey, Dean, I had this vision that something's happening at our old house," and Dean is like, "I'm not gonna go back to that fucking place just because you had a weird little dream." And this is kind of a big moment because this is where Sam reveals that like he dreamed of Jessica's death before she died. And so that's why Sam has been feeling guilty. That's why he felt guilty during the mirror curse episode. And that is kind of what convinces Dean to go, even though he really doesn't want to go.
Yeah, he does say that he promised to himself that he would never go back there, which is...
Hey, shout out to the parallels between Dean and Rapunzel.
Get out of here.
You know, they both have an abusive parent and they both don't want to go back to the place where they grew up, but then they do have to go back and face their trauma and something absolutely fucking crazy happens there. Shout out to the Tangled series Supernatural Parallels. Anyway, I'd like to shout out it's the 5th anniversary of the Tangled series was this week. So, anyways, when we're recording this. So yeah, they go back and it's actually quite creepy. Again, they are two grown men. They go to this house and Sam's like, "Hey, we used to live here. Like, can we like see the house, whatever?" And Jenny's like, "Okay, like I'll show you around." And then she starts like telling them about like the weird shit that happens in the house. And she's like, "There's like weird flickering lights and there's noises and like kids seeing stuff and whatever." And Sam and Dean are like, I guess there's a case in our house. And so they have to like research the past of the house and they have to basically compare notes on what their dad told them about the night their mother died, because one of them was a child being traumatized and one was a baby.
Yeah.
And
they are also very much like, well, I guess we can't, like, what do we even do? And Dean's like, I guess we just have to treat it like it's a normal case. So they are operating like it's a normal case, but they're also clearly like not having a good time.
Yeah, it's very like, I need therapy. And it's also like both the stuff about like Sam having a vision, like sharing that he's been having visions, and this is also where Dean like shares his memory of that fateful night that we have seen in the first episode. And you know, and he's like, "Yeah, I remember it. This is what happened. I'm the one who carried you out of the house, blah blah blah." And Sam didn't know. Sam didn't know that it was Dean who carried him out of the house. And obviously that's going to be a continuing theme, that Dean saves Sam forever. Now I'm sad. Oh, I just made myself sad. Oh no. Wait a minute. Oh no. Arcane reference.
Get out. You're done. Move on.
That's a better show. This part is kind of insane because Dean kind of has one of those moments and he calls his dad. He calls John.
He says to Sam, he's like, "I'm gonna go use the bathroom really quick before we go to do research," and then goes like behind this gas station that they're outside of and has this like extremely emotional call where like, I'm like, "Jensen, you should be in a better show than this because you're a pretty good actor."
Literally, he calls whatever burner phone his dad has, and he knows his dad is not going to pick up. And he has this moment, and this is where he like, you can see how upset he is. This is also probably like where this show had such a chokehold on people, where they were like, "Oh, look at these men showing emotion."
It's like, it really, again, this is why I say this episode, I don't know if it's necessarily good, but it has a lot of very good parts, because he is just like, "Dad, I don't know what to do. We're at home and I don't know what to do and I need you here. Okay, love you, bye."
It's kind of crazy. So yeah, it cuts to basically that the garbage disposal in the house stopped working. So Jenny called a plumber and he tries to fix it. And then there's this weird little toy monkey that starts clapping its hands with the cymbals, and then the unit, like the garbage disposal thing, like starts up and it tears apart his hand. For some reason he put his whole arm and his hand
I'm like,
in the garbage disposal.
Sir, if you are a good plumber, you are not putting your entire arm in the garbage disposal.
A fun fact is that an error in this episode is that the garbage disposal units work by using centrifugal force to grind food instead of blades. So the plumber's hand would likely not have been damaged to the extent portrayed. That's just a cool and fun fact from the Supernatural wiki.
This show sucks. That is the reason this show is bad.
Yeah, so that part is really fucked up. And then, so it cuts to the boys. They go to the garage, and a car garage. I'm like, whose garage? They go to a car garage. And they speak to this guy named Mike, who co-owned this car garage with their dad when he lived there.
Yeah,
and Mike,
before the everything, this shit hit the fan.
Before their dad went insane. And he talks about how nice it was before Mary died. And he mentions that after that, John started visiting every psychic in town. And that's very funny to me because how many psychics you got in Lawrence, Kansas?
The psychic, this is where we find out this new secret lore about Lawrence, Kansas. Is actually the U.S. psychic capital.
I can't. This is also another episode that really dates it in time because they start searching in the phone book.
They're going through yellow pages looking for psychics.
And there's a name that Dean kind of recognizes, Missouri Mosley. The first sentence in John's journal is, "I went to Missouri and I learned the truth," which is you'd think it was the state Missouri, but maybe it's not. So they visit Missouri Mosley.
She is okay. Girl boss, best character in the show.
Yeah, she is kind of an introduction to Supernatural, introducing the coolest fucking people as side characters, and then them being underutilized and eventually dying in some way. She's such an icon. I wish she was in it more. She's fantastic. She's played by Loretta Devine. It opens on her, it's very your typical psychic in a TV show. It opens on her telling this guy oh, your wife isn't cheating on you, but after he leaves, she's your wife is having an affair with the gardener. And as soon as they walk in, the Winchesters, she recognizes them immediately. She knows about how Jess died. She knows that John has disappeared, whatever. And they think she knows that because she is a psychic. But, well,
I mean, to be fair, she does know some of those. She does know some things because she is clearly a psychic, psychic.
She is, which is funny because they kind of play with that idea a lot in this show of who is a real psychic, but there are real psychics in Supernatural. So, and then it cuts back to the house, and one of the younger kids, he's in a playpen, and
little Richie,
and he escapes out of his playpen, and he opens the fridge, and he gets in there to try and get something, and the fridge closes on him, and he gets trapped in there. It's very terrifying. But he doesn't die. Jenny does rescue him, but it is very scary.
She walks up and she's like, "Oh my gosh, Richie, your mom's going insane," and then looks in the playpen and is like, "Uh-oh, where's my baby?" And she's running around, and she opens the fridge, and she's like, "Oh, how'd you get in there?"
Yeah, I don't know if I would think to look in the fridge, so that's why I was like, damn.
Jenny has that mom instinct. Good for her.
Yeah. So after they've been talking to Missouri, Sam and Dean come back to the house with her. and they say to Jenny, like, hey, we can help get rid of whatever the fuck is in your house, and Missouri can help. Um, and it isn't that very funny scene where like Sam and Dean are always like, oh yeah, we have to like think of some lie or whatever, and Missouri is like, okay, woman to woman, I've got this. And
Yeah,
you're like,
Missouri literally walks in and she says, your house is not normal. Um, take the kids out to a movie. By the time you get back, it'll all be taken care of.
this scene is very interesting to me because it's also a glimpse of like if the Winchesters were women, how different this show would be, because it would like the brothers have to do a lot to like get people to trust them because they are two random dudes showing up at people's houses all the time. But if it was, I mean, if it was women showing up, I feel like there would be a lot of women who would be like, "Oh, like yeah, I'm more likely to trust you in some way."
Man, I just realized I can't. There are two characters later on who are women who are so good. I cannot wait to get to them.
Yeah, it's Jody and what's her name?
I was thinking of Joe and Ellen.
Oh yeah, but I mean there are female hunters.
Joe and Claire. They are also okay. We'll get there.
Yeah. Oh my God, and Castiel's daughter.
We can't spoilers.
Little mini Dean Winchester. Anyway, so yeah, there are many female hunters, and while Missouri is not a hunter, you very much see this moment of like, wow, this would be a lot easier if it was a woman. And she's like, I've got this. Like, don't worry about it. And Sam and Dean are like, oh, thank fuck. I didn't want to have to lie about this. And this is the first time we ever see like hex bags, which is a thing that they use a lot in the show. Shout out to anybody who does practice witchcraft. This show says, fuck your life, Bing Bong. Like, yeah, I don't know what the fuck is happening in this show. Yeah, also this show is very not kind to witchcraft, but that's a story for another day. She helps them make the bags, and they basically are trying to purify the house. And basically as they're doing this, they find out like whatever's been doing this is a poltergeist, and it starts fighting them.
Yeah, and it's not the same thing that killed Jessica or their mom. Like it is something else.
Yeah, and Missouri, like she notices it. She's like, this is odd. And
she has a really interesting line here too that I kind of wish they touched on more in the show, where she says, like this thing is, it's not the same thing, but like there are wounds in this house and wounds can get infected. And basically the poltergeist that is here it came here because there was already dark energy and has infected the wound that was already here.
It's an idea that they only kind of touch on sometimes. They'd kind of do it later when there's, I don't know if it was with some of the gods that they bring in or with something else where they're kind of like, yeah, we only exist because people believe in us. It's like a thing that they kind of like, they really only touch on a little bit in Supernatural of like, yeah, it's the way that people act that brings these beings here.
It's such it's so weird and inconsistent, but it is whatever.
And you're like, wow, that's an actually interesting idea. Anyway, we will not be talking about that again. Because it's actually based in, I wouldn't say reality, but it's based in...
It's like they are trying to make a commentary, but don't actually understand what the commentary is.
No, not at all. It's basically what happens is they're fighting them, and then like they get all the bags placed, and then the house is like, okay, it's peaceful. And Missouri's like, we did it, Joe, and let's go. And when they leave, Sam is like, something feels off. There's a little spidey sense. And
his Sammy Sense is tingling.
You're done. They're sitting in the car watching the house, again, being creepy, and Jenny is in the upstairs window, and she's, like, screaming, just like how it happened in Sam's dream. And Sam's like, oh, fuck this, and he runs inside, and they get Jenny out, and then...
Yeah, and this is the scene right before, like, we see her bed is, like, shaking with her in it, and it cuts, and we see, like, the fire figure is, like, in Sari's room,
Yeah.
And like it is a whole hot mess. Like everything has returned.
Yeah. And Sam kind of like, again, he senses something. He has both the kids, he puts them on the ground, and then this is the moment where it's an exact parallel to the first episode, the scene where, you know, they where John looks at Dean and is like, "Get your brother out of the house," and he hands this Sam the baby. Sam
Hands Dean the
looks,
baby.
yeah, yeah. Sorry, he hands Dean Sam, who is a baby. In this scene, we have Sam who turns to Sari and is like, "Take Richie and get out of the house." And it's supposed to be a little parallel there, and you're like,
Yeah.
"Oh."
Meanwhile,
And then
Dean has already gotten Jenny out of the house and they're waiting outside. The kids run out and they're like, "Oh, thank God the kids are okay." And Sari is like, "Whatever it is, I think Sam is still in there fighting it." So Dean's like, "Uh-oh."
yeah, and you're like, "Oh wow, it's like poetry rhymes." And yeah, so Sam immediately does get his shit rocked, and then Dean has to literally like break down the front door and run back
With
into
an
this.
axe.
Yeah, and the house is on fire. It's a whole thing. The poltergeist, the like invisible force, it's like basically like pinned him to the wall, and then that fiery figure appears. So it's clearly they are two separate things. And Dean's like, "Okay, I'm gonna shoot it with rock salt or whatever the hell." And the fiery figure that's basically translucent, whatever, it becomes a person, or it becomes something
Like
not translucent.
It's still on fire, but you can see the person. Like it becomes a person who is then on fire. And you're never
Yeah.
gonna guess who it is.
It's their mother in a white nightgown. And she looks at Dean, and then she looks at Sam and is like, "I'm sorry." And then she basically says, "You're done," to the poltergeist.
Yeah.
And then disappears. Basically, she's been protecting the house. And it's a great, for those of us who've watched the later seasons of Supernatural, it's kind of nuts to watch.
Yeah, it's also, is it not a tiny bit of a plot hole that we can get into later, or is it?
I don't actually know. I'd have to really track. I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
Okay, cool.
Um,
But anyway.
But yeah, I don't know why she says "I'm sorry" to Sam. I guess because he did get his shit rocked.
And we know too, like maybe again, spoiler for a later season, but does she not have a bit of an impact as to like everything that has happened to them?
Is with her weird fucking family?
Yeah, I thought my impression was that she was like, again, I don't think the writing is this good.
I just thought it was something very simple of like, "Oh, sorry I didn't help you. Like, sorry you got hurt, like, and I didn't help you earlier and you got your shit rocked." Or maybe "I'm sorry that you're neurodivergent and a minor and you have these weird little powers."
Sorry that you have stupid little powers, Sam.
But yeah, so Jenny and her family, they return to the house. Missouri's like, "I'm gonna keep an eye on them." And Sam and Dean leave.
And Missouri also has a moment. Missouri has a moment where she's like, "Sam, how did you know that something was happening in the house? Like, I didn't, and you did. And that's really impressive." And he's like, "Hee, I'm messed up.
I'm just a little guy." And you're like, this is a mouse tool we'll use later. And usually the end of the episode is when they ride off, but the end of the episode is Missouri going home, and she's talking.
Yeah, and she's saying like, "Man, those boys, like Sam, he is so powerful. He is so like sensitive to magic and that kind of stuff. Shit is crazy."
Yeah, and you think she's talking to herself, and then she walks into her living room, and John Winchester is sitting there. She's talking to him, and she's like,
"Why don't you call your kids?"
And he's like, "I can't until I know the truth." And she's just like, I'm tired of you. I'm tired of you and your bullshit. And yeah, same. I wouldn't deal with John Winchester either.
It's so crazy. And she's like, okay, well, you need to call your kids. And he's like, I have to find out the truth. Then the episode ends.
Yeah. And this is kind of the first instance of how asshole like John Winchester is, because you have that earlier scene of Dean being like, Dad, I'm really going through it. And then John being like, fuck your life, bing bong.
Being like, I'm going to go ahead and set that to do not disturb.
And you're like, I mean, to be fair, he does look like he feels bad about it.
He does look like he is quite remorseful. He looks like he is going through it.
Yeah.
That being said, he's still John Winchester.
Yeah.
Nothing will change that.
Yeah. So
it's this episode, again,
bonkers.
It's bonkers. It introduces, I think the main thing I take away is it introduces Missouri, who is an icon, a girl boss, and my best friend personally.
I love her very much. I wish we saw her more. And it also introduces like Lawrence, Kansas as like this very important place to them. Oh, good lord. Oh, this episode also has another Shining reference.
Yeah, when Dean is cutting down the door.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also, is that force, is it really a poltergeist? Oh, it is. It is really a poltergeist.
The other force is a poltergeist, but Mary was also... Question, why was Mary hiding in the kid's bedroom and jumping on and scaring her for no reason? Mary, what's your deal?
Mary?
You're not normal.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, it actually is a poltergeist because, Missouri says, yeah, it came through the cracks of your family's fucked up.
Yeah, it is a lot.
Yeah.
I think the juxtaposition of the worst episode in the one of the worst episodes in the show with an episode that introduces a lot of really important lore, unfortunately, par for the course.
Yeah, that's welcome to Supernatural. Season 1 said.
Speaking of being welcomed, we're leaving now. Thank you for listening. Follow us on social media at Mystery Spotcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And please make sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, and Overcast. If you want to hear more from us, we are both co-hosts on RuPaul's Pod Race, a queer Star Wars podcast. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. We are also going bi-weekly, so the next episode will not be next week, but the week after. See you 2 Tuesdays from now for more slang people, queer baiting things, the supernatural business.